Imagine that your young nephew was born today, and you were tasked with the mission of buying clothes for the little guy. What color clothes would you choose? Would you stick with the traditional color of blue? Or maybe would you go for something different? Say, green, yellow, purple, or maybe even pink? This question can bring us to the heated controversy on gender. It's been a center of controversy for many years, but I'm not here to continue the traditional debate around this topic. So hear me out. With the recent gender activism, more encouragement of self-exploration and identity recognition has come to surface. However, some radicals are latching on to these arguments and leading us astray. Some business people and politicians are taking unfair advantage of the campaigns that we have now, turning this into their market deals or slogans. They are commoditizing identity. However, why are they succeeding in commoditizing advocacy? I think they're grabbing a hold of a blind spot in our advocacy logic, and that is in the debates and the campaigns that we have today, these things originate from gender norms, yet we've been focusing on gender itself. Regarding gender norms, I think that these strict biases that regulate how we should behave according to the male-female gender binary are what truly trap us, and these are what we should be fighting to get rid of. And therefore, I propose that for the next 10 minutes, let's set aside the debates and controversies on identity recognition, and instead focus on gender norms and reactions against them. Let's start from a while back. Maybe let's say from 1850. In 1850, a woman performed perfect brain surgery. She was awarded with the only Medal of Honor from the US Army given to a woman. She saved countless lives in the American Civil War, and she proved to lots of people that women could be as professionally and emotionally capable as men. Her name was Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. And yet when she swapped her traditional skirt for pants instead, society arrested her for indecency. It's amazing to me that when you can perform surgery as brilliantly as anybody can, people actually arrest you for just these norms. That's just crazy. The only literal difference between contemporary skirts and pants were the ruffles, the color, and the numbers of cuts and stitches that you make to pieces of cloth. However, the genders associated with them are just norms that we impose. And from the huge panic and rigid identity definitions that they have caused, we can see that this probably isn't the wisest idea. This example is nowhere a singular happening. For centuries, we've been told that gender norms are somehow hardwired into our biology, that they're natural. In my own example, I've been told multiple times by teachers and elder relatives on how girls are just more fit for humanities, while boys are better at STEM. Why? They say it's because it's natural, and it's been like this for centuries. Is it, though? Well, now I'm proud to tell them that I've met girls and women who are brilliant in the fields of medical science and pure math, and boys who are amazing at creating poetry and analyzing philosophy. A new generation has proved this statement that they've been stressing so adamantly to be wrong. Therefore, what if I made the bold statement and said that gender norms are among the greatest works of fiction ever written, that these norms are just a giant story edited across time by priests, politicians, and business people? This story of rigid gender norms and divisions has existed for too long, causing amazing women and men to be forgotten in history, or even to have their accomplishments buried under the names of their counterparts. This story has caused women to only account for 25% of national parliaments. This story has caused men to have spiking anxiety and depression rates due to being faced with the stigma and pressure of being the primary breadwinners of the household. This story has existed for way too long, and for too long, its negative impacts have been overlooked. And that's why today, I stand here, calling out its outdated status and its negative effects. Like all toxic stories, I think it's time for a rewrite. How should we begin to rewrite the century-old narrative? It's rooted itself into sectors of education, art, film, science, and even some religions. Uprooting it will, by no means, be easy. The good news, however, is that generations before us have already begun to realize these biases and make changes to them. We can take Shakespeare, for example, as one of the earliest and most well-known people who put the theme of gender norms into his plays. In his play The Twelfth Night, the female character Viola dresses up as a man just by changing her clothes. And guess what? Nobody noticed. Of course, in real life, although if we would want to roleplay a different identity, it definitely requires more work than just changing our clothes, Shakespeare's message still shines through. And that's that gender norms are just a performance that we choose to believe in. And therefore, if we fast forward 400 years, the philosopher Judith Butler tells us the same message. Gender norms are a performance. They are not biology. If we want to draw in a more recent example, let's say about the pink versus blue binaries, often associated with two genders. Now we see pink tied to girls and blue to boys. This is a very rigid definition that I trust many of you have come across before. However, a quote from the Earnshaw's infant department in 1918 completely flips this debate. They stated that the generally accepted rule is pink for the boys and blue for the girls. Why? Because blue was associated with the Virgin Mary, while pink was linked to the color red, and thus the quality of strength, and thus boys. However, interestingly, after World War II, we see a complete flip of this phenomenon. Pink began to be sold by brands and retailers as the perfect color for women, while blue suddenly became masculine. None of this is science. This affirms the same message, and that's gender norms are a performance. They are artificial. They are not biology. This new statement that we bring into consideration isn't just pure theory or fantasy. Many real-life examples can actually prove this. If we look to the North American indigenous cultures, where the two-spirit people are celebrated for embodying both masculine and feminine traits. Let's look to the Hawaiian and Pacific Islander cultures, where the Mahu are generationally respected for their place in between the male and female genders, valued as caretakers, healers, and teachers of ancient traditions. Now, having proved that these norms are just artificial, let's take a look at how they've actually negatively impacted all of us. Take the example of Darwin, the father of evolution. He was convinced that man attains a higher eminence in whatever he can try than can a woman. Well, as we all know now, this is misconception. Society had jailed up contemporary women to the domestic sphere and neglected the fact that women are just as capable as men in faith, intellect, and ambition. We can actually take a small survey here, right now, to prove this point. Feel free to raise your hands if you've ever heard of the name Maria Anna Nannerl Mozart before, or heard of her accomplishments, maybe? I don't see many hands going up, and so therefore this can lead to my conclusion that women like her have been buried under social norms. Maria Anna Nannerl Mozart was actually Wolfgang Mozart's sister. She was an incredibly talented pianist, and studies show that she had continued composing music before and after 18. When she went on tours with her brother, she was actually biled above Wolfgang, suggesting that she maybe even had more talent than him. However, after 18 and into her 20s, she was forced to stay home, go away from her musical career, and prepare for marriage. This is why that no musical pieces under her name have survived. In fact, her name itself has nearly vanished from history entirely. This evidences how women have been buried by gender expectations and norms, causing their talents, passion, and brilliance to wither away. We can look on the other side of the narrative. We can see the effects that these gender norms have brought to men. While a society based on this set of gender norms may indeed prioritize men in marital, legal, and political matters, it still brings on layers and layers of restrictions. For instance, boys are told, early on, that vulnerability is somehow a weakness. If we take an example from my own cousin, who fell off his bike at the age of 6, scraped both his knees and elbows really, really bad, his grandfather told him to man up and stop crying. Men and boys may learn to hold in their emotions because they're afraid for being mocked for tears. If, say, you dream of going into the fashion industry and creating your own clothing brand, only to be told that it was somehow unmanly and that you should quit to do something like rocket engineering or astrology. These toxic norms can even cause mental and physical harms. Studies show how men face pressure to be perpetual providers, and even a proportion of men avoid to see the doctor to appear tough, and this actually leads to medical conditions worsening, when they in fact could have been entirely preventable. Equating sensitivity and vulnerability, or even just care of yourself, with failure in men is just wrong. All of this above shows confusion of nurtured culture for nature, and we've been paying for it with bias and double standards ever since. These rules don't actually protect anyone, as you can see. All they do is isolate individuals from each other. Thankfully, though, every generation has its people who step out and rewrite these stories. In 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft published A Vindication of the Rights of Women, expelling the idea that women were inherently inferior, calling out for equal opportunity instead of predetermined roles. In 1949, we have the publication of Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex. In this book, she popularized the idea that both women and men were limited by gender norms. In 2014, on a similar TEDx stage, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie articulated the idea that what if we focused on ability instead of gendered expectations? Her speech asked that we free each other from gender norms and these limitations and become truer versions of ourselves. So, if we would want to make further change, where should we start? I think that, in the beginning, we can start by questioning the everyday norms that we may see around us. For instance, why is ambition encouraged in men but often criticized in women? Why are women expected to be more emotional and that men must be more logical? Secondly, we can resurrect forgotten voices. For instance, we can reconstruct the stories of people like Maria Anna Nannerl Mozart, like I mentioned, and stop power from actually thriving on exclusivity. Finally, we can build our own new stories, stories that don't replicate the same norms and narrow limitations that we used to have. Gender norms are not a chapter in the biology textbook. It's a huge work of fiction, complete with abused power and conformity. But the thing is that we don't actually have to continue and be dependent on these old narratives. We can build new thoughts, new beliefs, and new identities. Therefore, let's write a story where man versus women isn't the ultimate plot twist. Let's write a story and build new lives where maybe 200 years from now, people can look back on our generation and say, this is where the gender narratives were finally set free. Thank you for listening.